The gospel lesson this morning is from the 22nd chapter of Matthew, verses 1 through 14. You can find it on page, what is that? 24. Page 24 in your pew Bibles. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. And again he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. And then he said to the slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. And then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot. Throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" Here ends the reading. The year that Aaron and I were married, I think we were in 9 weddings, right? You were either a bridesmaid or I officiated at. That's a lot of weddings to go to in 1 year. And we got really good at evaluating people's invitations and their stationery and the crudité plates at the reception. We got a really good eyeful of DJs and all that kind of stuff. And while planning your own wedding is often stressful enough, going to other people's weddings can be too, especially when they don't do it the way that you would do it, and you've been to 9 that year, so you feel entitled to, quietly comment, not criticize, but comment on how they do what they do. And of course, the first thing that always shows up is the announcement of the wedding. And there's an RSVP card in there. Respondez, s'il vous plaît. Let us know if you're coming. So, of course, you check the box, and some of them give you a little line to write out what you would like to be called in there. Mr. and Mrs. Ott, Reverend and Mrs. Ott, whatever it is. But one of the cards that we began to get kind of as this went along, and it came for the last wedding that we were at, didn't say any of that. Didn't ask you to write your name in the blank. Didn't ask you to put the spelling. Did not ask you to select whether you wanted beef or chicken or fish or any of that stuff. All it said was, RSVP with regrets only. RSVP with regrets only. I thought how nice that is. Not because you've saved me some amount of work and that kind of thing, but because you have assumed, and I think in this case it's okay to assume, that if you have seen fit to invite me to your wedding, I will make every effort to be there. And so the only reason why I wouldn't be able to be there is if something earth-shattering is happening in my life. And so if you don't hear from me, you will assume that on the date and time, I will be there. It kind of sets I think, a nice precedent for that whole event. The people that I love will be there. I don't need to know whether you're coming or not. You'll show up. And so I just thought that was great. And, as often happens in the life of a pastor, you kind of accumulate these stories, never really knowing what you'll do with them. There are people who write it down in books. They keep journals of things that they come across, newspaper clippings, magazine articles. This is just one of those things that I kind of stored away. Respond with regrets only. And then Jesus goes on talking in parables, telling confusing stories that we don't always understand. And it just so happens that this week, it's about a wedding banquet for the king and the king's son. And the king does what they did in those days. Paper was expensive and people couldn't read, so there would be no sense sending out a nice piece of stationery for you to receive in your mailbox. That didn't exist. So the king does what the kings did, which was to send runners out and to announce to people, I'm having a party. I'd like you to come. Please let me know if you will be able to be there so that I know how many food items I need to prepare. Thinking, of course, that everyone would come. Who would say no to a king? But people didn't come. They didn't show up. They were busy. They had to wash their hair that night. I think, as it would do for any reasonable person, it really made the king mad. Everything's ready. I had the animals ready to go. It's God, so there's always barbecue. I've got the hats, I've got the noisemakers, the band is ready to go, and there is no one here. Now, I've seen those kind of movies where something like that happens and the person says, you know what? I'm having a party anyway. I already paid for it. Everything's here. We're going to have a good time. And that's exactly what happens. And the king says, go out and just bring some people in here. Get anybody that you can think of to come, because I'm not eating all of this food by myself. Well, friends, that's us. We are the people who have been invited to this party. We are those people who have been asked to RSVP. Respondez s'il vous plaît. I knew that French would come in handy someday. And you know, the problem is that for a lot of us, we have RSVP'd. We got the card in the mail. We talked about how nice it was that God went on Etsy and got something really cute for us. We put it up on our fridge or wherever it is that we keep those things. We put it into our calendars and our iPhones. And then when the day of the party came, we forgot. We didn't go. We double booked. We triple booked. We forgot to show up. We forgot to even swing by and have a piece of cake. That RSVP and all that work that went into it and that open invitation to swing by from 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock, we missed it. It's not our proudest moment. I will tell you that when I inadvertently double book myself, when I have to be multiple places at the same time, I feel really awful because I want to be there for everybody all the time. It's a problem. I'm working on it. So what do we do in this case? What do we do when we said yes to God? Yes, I will be there. Yes, I will come. I'm your guy. I'm your gal. I'm down for the cause. I'm there. Except when I'm not. How do we handle that? What do we do? Well, in this case, the answer is kind of dark and gloomy. Go get whoever you can. Go bring them in. And then when they show up and they're not quite right either, there's weeping and there's gnashing of teeth and there's outer darkness and there's some ugly stuff that happens. And when I read that, I am troubled by that. Aaron and I had a conversation about that this morning over coffee. What do you do with that? How do you understand that? I'm not sure that I want to go to that kind of party. But I want to encourage us to remember that Jesus is talking to the people who should have understood this the first time, who had heard this multiple times He's still talking to the Pharisees and the scribes, those people who were supposed to be just a little bit smarter and just a little bit better and who he wouldn't have needed to explain this to multiple times. But we know that he did. And so when you're telling these kind of stories, you want to give that kind of cut and dried answer. It's black and white. It's yes and no. The offer was extended and you missed it. It's not going to happen again. But there's hope. There is hope here. There is hope because for us, there is this 5-letter word that exists. Maybe you've heard of it. Occasionally we name women this. We call it grace. Heard of it? Yeah. Should be seeing everybody's head nod. We Methodists like grace. I think it's because we double book ourselves all the time. Grace. God's understanding and God's love for us and God's knowledge that just because we miss things and we forget things sometimes, it doesn't make us necessarily bad people. Actually, it doesn't make us bad people at all. It makes us busy people. But we need to remember that we sent in that RSVP. That we responded in the affirmative, that yes, we were really excited to come and eat that cake and wear the silly hat and dance the YMCA on God's dance floor or the electric slide or whatever it is. And that we did remember and we would like to come back and try it again. We would really like that invitation to come back again so that we can say, yes, I will be there. Yes, I will celebrate with you. Because God's just throwing parties all the time. I don't know if you knew that. But remember to RSVP.